now, researchers have uncovered the possible location of the Hercules of Cádiz temple.
For centuries, the legend of Hercules, half man, half god, has walked the fine line between myth and mystery. His epic strength, his labors, his divine heritage, all burned into the fabric of ancient storytelling. But one question has haunted historians, adventurers, and archaeologists alike. Where did Hercules go when he died? Did the gods claim him, or was there truly a tomb somewhere, waiting to be uncovered?
What they reveal through this advanced infrared imaging are previously unknown details.
After thousands of years, what many called the holy grail of classical archaeology may have finally been found. And it's not what anyone expected. Hidden beneath coastal waters in southern Spain, a rectangular ruin has stunned scientists and sparked wild excitement across the academic world. And the most astonishing part? A humble university student may have just rewritten history. What lies buried there has left even hardened historians speechless. And as the layers are peeled back, the line between God and man is starting to blur. Let's dig into this discovery, but first, we'll recap who this legend was. Who was Hercules and the enigma of his tomb? For thousands of years, the name Hercules has stood as a symbol of unparalleled strength, divine origin, and near-mythic endurance. Half god and half man, Hercules, or Heracles, as he was known in the original Greek, was not just a hero in ancient tales, he was a force of nature. Born from the union of Zeus, king of the gods, and a mortal woman named Alcmene, Hercules' existence alone straddled two worlds, the celestial and the earthly. But while his life was chronicled in myths, monuments, and manuscripts, his death, and more importantly, his final resting place, has remained one of the most puzzling enigmas in all of history. From his earliest days, Hercules was destined for greatness. According to myth, he was hated by Hera, Zeus's wife, who sent snakes to kill him in his cradle. The infant crushed them with his bare hands. Later, cursed by Hera into a fit of madness, Hercules killed his wife and children, an unforgivable act that he could only atone for by performing a series of seemingly impossible tasks known as the 12 labors. These tasks included slaying the invincible Nemean lion, capturing the golden hind of Artemis, cleaning the Augean stables in a single day, and even venturing into the underworld to capture the three-headed dog Cerberus. These weren't just feats of strength, they were spiritual, physical, and moral challenges designed to break any mortal man. And yet, to the shock of everyone, Hercules completed them all. His legend was secured. But even the greatest of demigods meets his end. According to myth, Hercules died in agony from a poisoned robe, a gift from his jealous wife Deianira. In some stories, Zeus intervenes, plucking Hercules from his mortal pain and granting him immortality among the stars. But other accounts tell a more grounded story, that Hercules was buried by his worshippers and laid to rest in a tomb lost to time. And that's where the true mystery begins. For centuries, scholars and skeptics dismissed the idea of Hercules' tomb as a mere myth, just another detail in a story passed down through oral tradition and embellished through time. But not everyone agreed. Some ancient Roman writers, including the geographer Pomponius Mela, referenced the existence of a physical place in southern Spain, believed to be linked to the demigod, the Temple of Hercules Gadatanus. Located in the area now known as Cádiz, Spain, this temple was not only a center of worship, but also a pilgrimage site for ancient warriors and emperors. Julius Caesar reportedly visited the temple before his rise to power, standing before a statue of Hercules and weeping, not out of sorrow, but from an overwhelming sense of destiny. Hannibal, too, was said to have prayed there before crossing the Alps to strike at Rome. The temple was a marvel of its time, famed for its two colossal columns, a perpetually burning flame, and an altar inscribed with ancient Phoenician characters. But most fascinating of all were the whispers that beneath this sacred ground lay the tomb of Hercules himself. Was it a metaphor, a symbol, or was something real buried beneath the temple's foundations? Over the centuries, the temple vanished, swallowed by time, tides, and shifting geography. Earthquakes, floods, and war erased almost every trace of its once mighty presence. Without visible ruins to investigate, the temple and the tomb slipped into legend. But the mystery never really died. In modern times, the hunt for Hercules' tomb has become something of a holy grail for historians, archaeologists, and dreamers alike. While other ancient wonders like the tomb of Alexander the Great or the Hanging Gardens of Babylon still spark imaginations, the Temple of Hercules Gadatanus stands apart. Why? Because it was believed to have existed at the intersection of mythology and history, a place where gods were worshipped, where heroes passed through, and perhaps where one was laid to rest. The challenge, however, was daunting. Cádiz sits on a narrow strip of land, shaped and reshaped by centuries of coastal change. If the temple once stood there, its foundations might now lie underwater or buried beneath modern developments. A few stones here, a few fragments there, none ever quite enough to confirm the temple's existence, let alone the tomb. As the decades passed, the temple's exact location became the subject of debate, speculation, and even ridicule. Multiple excavation attempts, most notably on the hill known as Cerro de los Mártires, turned up inconclusive results. Some researchers clung to the idea of a seaside location. Others believed it lay further inland, where the coastline might have extended centuries ago. Meanwhile, technological limitations made deep analysis almost impossible, until now. In the past few years, technological leaps in remote sensing, especially LiDAR, light detection and ranging, have offered archaeologists new ways to peel back time without disturbing a single grain of soil. From mapping lost cities and jungles to tracing ancient roads buried beneath urban sprawl, LiDAR has become the new holy lens through which lost civilizations are found. And it is through this very lens that a small group of researchers from the University of Seville made a startling discovery. At the heart of their team, not a seasoned veteran of the field, but a young doctoral student with a hunch and a laptop. What he found beneath the shifting sands and waves of Cádiz was not what anyone expected. But what if the old stories weren't so far-fetched after all? What if the line between myth and memory was thinner than we believed? Because now, a structure has appeared. Massive, rectangular, and eerily similar to what ancient writers described. The temple of Hercules Gaditanus, long believed to be a legend, may be real. And if it is, then so too might be the tomb beneath it. What began as a myth passed down over wine-dark seas may finally be emerging from the depths of time. And the gods? They may not be as distant as we thought. The long search, decades of archaeology, chase the fabled sanctuary and tomb. For most people, the idea of uncovering Hercules' tomb sounds like something out of a Hollywood script, an Indiana Jones fantasy set against the shimmering backdrop of the Mediterranean. But for historians and archaeologists, the search for Hercules' final resting place has been a serious and frustrating pursuit spanning more than a century. At the center of this quest is not just a man, myth, or demigod, but a structure of near-mythical reputation, the Temple of Hercules Gaditanus. The Temple of Hercules Gaditanus, also known as the Temple of Melkart to the Phoenicians, was believed to be one of the most important religious sites of the ancient world. Located near the southern coast of modern-day Spain, in the province of Cádiz, this temple was where Mediterranean cultures merged, where Phoenician gods blended with Greek and Roman pantheons, and where the boundary between history and legend blurred. This was no ordinary temple. Ancient accounts describe it as colossal in scale, with twin columns that rose high into the air, later echoed in the Pillars of Hercules, the symbolic gate between the known world and the unknown. The temple reportedly burned an eternal flame on its altar, its architecture inscribed with characters so old they were almost unintelligible even to Roman scholars. Some claimed it was a repository of treasure, others believed it was a site of prophetic visions. But above all, it was sacred ground, a place of pilgrimage for heroes and emperors alike. Roman authors wrote of Hannibal praying there before his campaign against Rome, and of Julius Caesar visiting the site, only to burst into tears upon seeing a statue of Alexander the Great. Why? Because Caesar believed he had not yet achieved the glory of his hero. The temple was a stark reminder of his unfinished destiny. And in at least one tantalizing passage, ancient writers claimed that Hercules himself was buried beneath the temple, a claim dismissed for centuries but never fully forgotten. Despite the grand accounts, the temple eventually vanished from the historical record. Tides shifted, coastlines evolved, and earthquakes may have contributed to its destruction. Unlike the Parthenon in Athens or the pyramids of Egypt, no monumental stones remained above ground to hint at its former majesty. As centuries passed, the Temple of Hercules became more legend than reality, an archaeological ghost haunting southern Spain. The search for the temple's location began in earnest during the 18th and 19th centuries, when European explorers and antiquarians began cataloging ancient sites across the Mediterranean. Cádiz, with its layers of Phoenician, Roman, and Moorish history, was a natural target. However, Finding a temple buried under coastal sand, marshland, or even under the ocean itself proved far more difficult than expected. Some scholars believe the temple had once stood on the island of Sancti Petri, a spit of land off the coast of Cádiz, now accessible by a narrow causeway. Others pointed to inland hills like Cerro de los Martires, or low-lying areas where ancient ports may have once stood. But every excavation, every survey, returned inconclusive. A few stones here, some shards of pottery there, but nothing definitive. This didn't stop the dreamers, though. An archaeological holy grail. Over the decades, the Temple of Hercules Gaditanus became known as one of archaeology's great mysteries. Like the lost city of Atlantis, it represented the thin veil between myth and reality. But unlike Atlantis, the temple had multiple, independent sources documenting its existence, making it feel more like a forgotten piece of real history than a fantastical creation. Still, every attempt to locate it ran into the same problem: nature. The region's shifting coastline, caused by erosion, earthquakes, and rising seas, had altered the landscape so dramatically that ancient maps were almost useless. What was once land could now be the seabed. What was once a temple could now lie meters below mudflats or submerged ruins. Many experts believed the temple, if it existed at all, would be buried under centuries of sediment or even completely destroyed by the encroaching ocean. It wasn't until recent decades that new technology gave archaeologists a fighting chance. Enter LiDAR, the eyes beneath the earth. In the last 20 years, archaeology has entered a technological renaissance. Tools like ground-penetrating radar, GPR, sonar mapping, and particularly LiDAR, which uses pulsed laser light to detect structures beneath vegetation or terrain, have revolutionized how researchers explore sites without physically disturbing them. In jungles, LiDAR revealed Mayan cities hidden for centuries. In Europe, it traced Roman roads and Iron Age settlements invisible to the naked eye. So naturally, researchers turned to this tech to help solve Cádiz's ancient puzzle. And that's where the story gets very interesting. In the early 2020s, a coalition of researchers from the University of Seville, the Andalusian Institute of Historical Heritage, IAPH, and experts from the universities of Cádiz and Córdoba began re-examining the problem from a new angle. Instead of relying on outdated surface excavation, they began reconstructing ancient topographies using satellite imagery, LiDAR scans, and paleogeographic modeling. Their focus shifted to the marshes and tidal channels around Sancti Petri, particularly areas where the coastline had shifted dramatically over the past 2,000 years. One particular hypothesis suggested that a significant ancient structure, possibly a temple, could lie buried beneath the mud and sand of a now submerged peninsula. The work was laborious. Every scan had to be cleaned, matched with historical maps, and compared with ancient sources. But then, something surfaced. The student who saw what no one else did. In the middle of this massive academic undertaking, a single student emerged with a theory that would turn the project upside down. Ricardo Belizon Aragon, a young doctoral candidate at the University of Seville, had been studying ancient coastal geography when he noticed something peculiar in the LiDAR data. A rectangular anomaly buried just beneath the surface near the Sancti Petri channel. The structure was enormous, approximately 300 meters long and 150 meters wide. It had the orientation, size, and proportions consistent with classical temples, and it lay exactly where some ancient writers had claimed the Temple of Hercules once stood. At first, his findings were met with cautious curiosity, but when senior experts reviewed the data, they were stunned.
Uncontrollable sort of surge of excitement.
According to Francisco José Garcia, Belizon's advisor, the discovery was spectacular. Others described it as first class and impossible to ignore. The area was soon swarming with renewed interest, researchers rechecking every scrap of historical text for clues, journalists clamoring for details, and local authorities scrambling to protect the site. For the first time in centuries, the myth of Hercules' tomb was no longer confined to legend. There was a structure. There was evidence. And it was not what anyone expected. Why is this discovery so significant? Because if this submerged rectangular ruin is indeed the long-lost temple of Hercules Gaditanus, then everything changes. Suddenly, ancient Roman and Phoenician accounts take on new weight. Suddenly, the claim that Hercules may have been buried there is no longer fanciful. It becomes a credible archaeological hypothesis. It means that below the sands and waters of southern Spain could lie the remains of a structure where emperors wept, armies prayed, and one of the world's most famous demigods may have been honored in death. But the discovery isn't just monumental for its historical implications. It's a reminder that even the oldest stories, the ones we dismiss as myth, might still carry grains of truth buried just beneath the surface. And as excavation plans begin, and the world turns its eyes to Cádiz, one question grows louder. If this is the temple, where is the tomb? What lies beneath the temple shocks the world. When Ricardo Belizon Aragon first noticed that rectangular anomaly beneath the coastal sands of Sancti Petri, he had no idea he was about to shift the foundations of historical understanding. His find was initially hailed as the possible remains of the Temple of Hercules Gaditanus, lost for over 2,000 years. But as more data poured in, sonar imaging, geophysical surveys, and old texts digitally reanalyzed, the scope of the discovery expanded. And what emerged was more than just an ancient temple. It was something far more profound, something godlike. The ruins buried beneath Cádiz are unlike anything previously uncovered in the region. The structure is massive, with precise measurements that align eerily with ancient descriptions. Its layout mirrors known Greco-Roman temples, but with unique features, such as a sunken central chamber and a sub-level corridor that runs beneath what would have been the main altar. Historians and archaeologists, already stunned that any trace of the temple remained, were floored by these hidden chambers. Why? Well, in classical architecture, subterranean vaults beneath a main altar were almost exclusively reserved for burial, and in temples dedicated to deified figures, especially heroes like Hercules, those chambers often housed votive offerings, or tombs. That's when the whispers began. Could this be it? Could this be Hercules' tomb? Until now, ancient references to Hercules' burial were treated as symbolic, but several Roman authors, including Pliny the Elder and Pomponius Mela, mentioned something peculiar, that Hercules rested beneath the altar of his own temple in Gades, ancient Cádiz, and that locals made offerings to him as both god and man. Strabo, the Greek geographer, described the temple's inaccessibility to the general public, hinting that its inner sanctum was only for the initiated. These weren't vague allusions. These were detailed references to a specific location, specific rituals, and a buried figure of divine reverence. If this temple is what it appears to be, then these texts no longer sound mythological. They sound like historical documentation. The idea that Hercules was worshipped as both god and hero begins to align with the layout of this ruin, an elevated platform for public worship, and a hidden chamber below. Suddenly, what sounded like a metaphor reads like a map. Further analysis of the structure revealed a sealed inner space, a vault approximately 4 meters deep, measuring 6 by 3 meters, located directly beneath what would have been the sanctuary altar. It hasn't yet been excavated, but its presence alone is electrifying. Why? Because temples rarely included chambers like this unless they had something to conceal. Researchers are now working with advanced, non-invasive scanning technologies, magnetometry, resistivity, and low-frequency GPR, to peer inside without damaging the integrity of the site. Initial readings show that the chamber may contain stone sarcophagus fragments, metallic anomalies, and traces of burned organic matter, possibly incense or ceremonial fabrics. The team remains cautious, but their language has shifted from academic to reverent. They are calling this chamber El Sanctum del Semidios, the sanctuary of the demigod. If it contains a tomb, and if inscriptions confirm it was meant for Heracles, then this discovery becomes one of the most important archaeological finds in human history. Think about the implications. For centuries, Hercules has existed as a myth, immortalized in marble, fresco, and oral tradition. His stories were taught in schools, painted on amphorae, reenacted in theater. But there was always a gap, a fracture between belief and evidence. Unlike Alexander the Great, who had a known tomb, though lost, or Julius Caesar, whose ashes lay beneath Rome, Hercules was a phantom, until now. If this is his tomb, or even a tomb believed to be his by ancient followers. It rewrites not just the history of one man, but of myth itself. It means that ancient people didn't merely tell stories. They built temples, performed rituals, and enshrined their legends into stone. And they buried them. In Cádiz, Spain, we may now have physical proof of that legacy. The myth has come full circle. The implications go even deeper. This discovery doesn't just touch on classical mythology or Roman history. It strikes at the heart of how civilizations deify their heroes. Hercules was more than a muscle-bound warrior. His story was one of atonement, sacrifice, and transcendence. He was flawed, driven to madness, burdened by guilt, but through impossible labors, he earned redemption. That's why people worshipped him, not because he was perfect, but because he suffered. And if this temple was indeed his, then it's a global symbol of how we mythologize those who endure pain for greatness. His story, like the chamber beneath the altar, was never meant to remain hidden. It was meant to be unearthed when we were ready to understand it. News of the site's potential has spread like wildfire across academic circles. At the University of Oxford, Professor Eliza Cartwright called it the single most meaningful classical discovery of the 21st century. At Harvard, ancient historian Marcus D'Angelo wrote, "We're no longer asking if Hercules was real. We're asking, what else have we dismissed as myth that's waiting beneath the surface?" The Spanish government has issued emergency preservation orders, fencing off the site and placing it under military guard to prevent looting or disruption. UNESCO has already labeled it a provisional World Heritage Priority. And still, excavations have not yet begun in full. Researchers are moving slowly, carefully, respectfully. As one archaeologist put it, we're not just digging up bones, we're disturbing the memory of a god. What lies inside the chamber? Will it contain a name, a symbol, a funerary inscription to Hercules, the son of Zeus? Or will it be a hero's cenotaph, a symbolic tomb built not for a corpse, but for a legend? We don't yet know. But whatever is found, whether a sarcophagus, a statue, or an empty void, it's already changed how we view myth, history, and belief. The past has spoken, not with fables or scrolls, but with stone, and it's not what anyone expected. For centuries, the tomb of Hercules was thought to be a fantasy, an impossible prize, a legend without evidence. Now, a student, a scan, and a stretch of Spanish coastline have combined to challenge everything we thought we knew. And somewhere, beneath centuries of sand and silence, the demigod may finally rest, not in myth, but in memory. Here's a question for you. If a figure like Hercules, once thought to be pure myth, turns out to have a real tomb, what other legends might be rooted in truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unexpected discoveries. See you in the next one.